starting with some questions on your life and what led you into a career of cinema, what is the first movie you remember watching in theaters?
My first movie is actually The Lion King. I watched it when I was 5 years old, and I watched it many times in the theater. And I think that was the first movie I actually saw in the theater, and I thought it was an amazing film.
It is. And from there, what inspired you to eventually go into filmmaking yourself?
I think I began making all these amateur films with my neighbors. I grew up in the countryside of Norway. And from when I was like 11, I made a lot of films. We used up all the ketchup we had for blood. We, of course, watched all the Tarantino movies a bit before we were allowed to watch them. And then I like made these VHS cassettes, and I walked up to the neighbors and gave it to them. And when I had seen it, I went to the next neighbor. And so I kind of distributed my very violent films when I was 11 to the neighbors. And their response was that it's the best film they've ever seen. Of course, it was not, but that was what they told me. So that was the very beginning. And I think that gave me a lot of encouragement to continue making films.
So moving on to the film that we are discussing today, which is The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, which is a documentary, of course. It is a wonderful movie. I wanted to start by asking, this is a very moving story, a very powerful one, and of course a real story. How did you come into contact with the family of Ibelin? How did you find out about his life, and what led you to decide to adapt this into a documentary?
I learned about Mats Ibelin's story through Facebook, actually. So every year from the day Mats had passed away, he passed away in 2014. His uncle wrote about his passing on Facebook, and Mats's uncle was my teacher at school, and he was the one that taught me filmmaking, actually. But in 2019, Mats's uncle published a full article about Mats's life. And that was when I learned about the kind of life he had lived inside the World of Warcraft. And I read that article, I cried a lot after reading it, and then I contacted the family afterwards to ask them if it would be possible to make a film out of this story.
And of course, it is a very powerful subject. His life was quite amazing and not something we really expect nowadays. Many people often say that nowadays video games divide people, that they keep us all on our little screens. What do you think about that? Because clearly Matt's life is quite the opposite.
In a way, you can say that this film and also Matt's story is a celebration of online friendships. And I wanted really to take that world seriously. So the whole goal of this film is to try to understand how close you can get to someone that you never met, and ask the questions, is it possible to experience love with somebody you never met, for example? And how good of friends can you become with somebody when you just meet through your avatars? That is some of the themes we are exploring, and I hope also the film in a cinematic way shows that it's possible to get very close through your avatars and through gaming.
How did you feel when you heard the news that you were nominated for the award, and how are you feeling about the ceremony and voting itself?
For me, I became very proud. I had a goal with this film that it would resonate with a younger audience. And I was very unsure if I would manage to do that. So to get that acknowledgement from a younger audience was just amazing. I remember the very first public screening we had of the film in Norway. I showed it to a lot of young people. And then a 15-year-old came up to me after the screening, and he told me that I don't have any friends in real life. All of my friends are online. Now I can show this film to my parents, and they will understand better why this is so important to me. So to get that kind of acknowledgement from young people is just amazing. That was the goal, and also to make a film that people can feel that it's like this is my generation. This is also something that I'm experiencing when I'm getting friends online.
So, on a more technical level, the movie, of course, blends real footage with narration over the dialogue, and then some digital footage. How was the process of deciding when to use which, of blending the narration of the two, and creating this wonderful story? I gotta say.
That's a very good question, and that's also one of the most difficult things with the film. Mats and his friends, they had left behind around 42,000 pages of gaming dialogue. And these were all published publicly on the forums. They had external programs that kind of transcribed everything they were writing to each other. That makes it possible for us to recreate it because we know what was said, we know who said what, we know the places, we know also when it was said. So we took that archive and we downloaded 3D models from the game, and we began to recreate those scenes through animation. The goal here is also to try to include everyone in. I wanted my grandmother to feel that she understood the virtual world we are showing in the film. And the thing with Mats, Ibelin, and his friends, when they wrote to each other, they also wrote out actions and expressions. So Mats would write for his character Ibelin. Ibelin seems sincere yet saddened. So they would write out all these expressions. So we can say that we did have almost like a 42,000 pages long movie script. And then the process was to narrow that down and make it into animation with the aesthetics from the game. And we did not, we just took that world, we did not ask for permission. We just downloaded everything, made the film, and when we was almost finished, we asked for permission afterwards to use it.
With this movie, many of us in the young audience felt that you sent a strong message. Now, sometimes we imagine that people with such important health problems as Mats had do not have a life in many ways, and instead we can show through movie that they do. What do you feel about this subject?
I think when it comes to Mats, he was a complex person in many ways. He was the best friend you could ever have. And his parents, they thought that he lived a very lonely and isolated life without any friends. But then suddenly when he had passed away, people from all over Europe came to his funeral. Around 50 people wrote messages to his family saying how much he meant to them. And what Mats did is that he always asked his friends how they were doing. And he also prioritized to listen. And he fundamentally changed the lives of so many. At the same time, he was a person who was funny, charismatic, but also self-destructive. So we're trying to build a complex portrait of Mats. A part of his struggles in life is his illness, the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. That was also the reason why he passed away. What he says himself is that when he was gaming, he could kind of be whoever he wanted to be. And every time he logged into the game, he was running the same route every day. So he was doing a lot of the things he could not do in real life. He was doing that inside of the game. So we're trying to also give a portrait of both Mats, but also Ibelin in this film.
What do you think about the current scene of European film and what it can mean for European youth at home and for the future generation of Europeans?
So I'm just very proud to be part of it. I think it's very difficult to kind of compete in arts in general. I think that there's so many great films, and I'm just happy to be here and meet others. And I'm actually not that focused on winning anything. I think like in a way everyone deserves an award, because just to be able to make a film is incredible. It's so difficult with the financing and getting like all the permissions and getting a project up and running. So in a way, we are all winners because we were able to make a film, actually, I think.
For our last question on this very subject of filmmaking, what would you say to any aspiring young filmmaker at home watching?
I would say that to stick with kind of the joy of both watching and making films. Don't force yourself to watch like an old film if you don't want to. Maybe later in life that will happen. Then you would really like to watch Tarkovsky and Bergman and all these greats, but stick to what gives you joy. Also when you're making films. So use up the ketchup you have in the refrigerator and make the films you want to make, because I think, you know, to always try to find that inspiration and do exactly what you feel inspire you the most and the stories you want to tell, and then things will of course change at like on the different ages you have. So I think that's maybe my best advice, is to just try to feel and try to find out what do you like the most, what kind of films do you like to watch, and what films do you like to make, and make that. Don't try to make the films you think others want you to make.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.